Do you have a paranormal encounter you'd like to share with us? Send us an email with your story for a chance of it being featured on Weird World. In this video, we delve deeper into the eerie and inexplicable world of ghostly encounters by the police. In this episode, we share two unsettling stories of the police coming face to face with unexplainable ghostly phenomena, both in their personal lives and while carrying out their duties. Join us as we explore these strange and eerie incidents and wonder what mysteries might lie behind them. The mischievous reporter. Wherever law enforcement ends up to investigate crimes and accidents, journalists usually flock to the scene, and on occasion they'll even develop friendly relationships with the police officers they work with. In a small town in New Mexico, this was such a case with the sheriff and his department. This story details the strange paranormal encounters experienced by the department and its sheriff in relation to a local reporter by the name of Bob D. Bob D, the ambitious reporter that he was known to always rush to the scene as soon as there was breaking news, be it a chase, a fire, or any other serious incident, with the aid of a police scanner. Being that the local police force was small, Bob's presence at various incidents started to become noticed, with him usually showing up to a scene at least twice a week. Doing so began to make Bob quite popular among the force, naturally predisposing the officers there to get to know him and like him. Though a friendly man, he enjoyed being a bit of a trickster, flicking people's ears and waiting with a big grin on his face as they turned around to react. Sadly, Bob contracted lung cancer, which many blamed on his smoking habit. After a brief battle, he passed away, causing the entire force to feel his loss profoundly. There was a sense of melancholy around town without Bob's cheerful demeanour and sense of humour to lighten up the otherwise upsetting situations. Instead of honouring Bob's wish to be cremated, his wife buried him, not wanting an urn of her husband to be present in the house as a constant reminder of his passing. It was after this that strange events began to occur. Many people, both civilians and police officers, began reporting seeing Bob at car wrecks, fires, and other types of incidents that he had reported on throughout his career. Some claimed to have seen him standing with the crowds, jotting down his observations, while others simply sensed his presence. Over the course of 2 weeks, around 30 reports were collected of sightings. However, the sheriff dismissed them all. He was a practical man who believed in what he could see and touch, not in ghost stories. He was convinced that people missed Bob so much that they were fooling themselves into believing he was still around. That was, however, until one night when the sheriff and his wife arrived at his nephew's house. They were both trembling with terror and had their guns drawn. The nephew, also an officer on the local force, thought they had been attacked because he had never seen his uncle so rattled before. The sheriff had previously been involved in 2 shootouts with suspects and had just brushed them off. But something in his demeanour had changed, as if he'd encountered something the likes of which he'd never encountered before. He truly looked as if he had seen a ghost. Their nephew calmed them down and asked what had happened. The uncle explained that they had been sitting on the couch watching TV when he felt his ear being bitten. But there was nothing there. Suddenly he felt a flick on his ear and turned to see Bob standing in the open door frame of their bedroom with a big smile on his face. The sheriff jumped up and swiftly brought his wife's attention to the figure. As she turned, she too observed Bob standing clear as day right in front of them. Bob smiled, turned and walked across the living room and out the front door, closing it behind him. After a brief moment of shock, the sheriff quickly ran to his room to snap up his gun and search for Bob, but there was no trace of him. The sheriff eventually requested backup, and they all stayed at the nephew's house for the night. However, that was not the end of the story for Bob. Over the next few months, people again reported seeing Bob numerous times, including on 2 other occasions by the sheriff. Once in the darkroom, while waiting for photos to develop, the sheriff felt a flick on his ear yet again. During the last month of sightings, people described Bob as looking worse and worse, as if he was getting tired and worn out. Later, it was discovered that Bob had been decomposing in his grave. Footprint of a child. Not every law enforcement officer serves in urban streets. Some dedicate their time to preserving law and order on military bases. Similar to cities, the graveyard shift for military police is typically calm, particularly during winter. Most bases possess alarmed buildings that are linked to a central system. If the alarm is triggered, a military police officer or MP will inspect all doors to ensure that they're secured. If not, the structure will be locked down and officers will investigate for intruders or a malfunction. This story commences quite like any other, on a peaceful night with no urgent matters requiring attending to. At roughly midnight, one MP and their partner were patrolling when an alarm was activated at the elementary school. As many service members and their families will typically reside on a military base, schools are also generally available. The partners inspected the building and found all doors to be shut and no one in sight. Following this, they notified the central control system that the building was secure and resumed their patrol. Around 20 minutes later, they received another call about a different alarm at the school. The officers returned to the building and conducted a thorough check. This time, they discovered an open door that led to the boiler room. The room was dark, damp, and full of cobwebs. The odour of diesel fuel from the pipes leading to the boiler was overpowering. The chamber wasn't particularly spacious, and the officers searched every nook and cranny, even inspecting the vents and cupboards in case someone was hiding. They presumed that someone had forgotten to lock the room, so they secured it, locked the door tightly, and resumed their patrol. Half an hour later, they received yet another call about the alarm. Once more, they returned to the school. Now, feeling increasingly suspicious, they inspected all doors and discovered them all to be locked, including the boiler room they'd previously inspected. All of the doors were alarmed, and exerting enough force on one would cause the alarm to sound. In the past, teenagers on the base had often been known to activate the alarm out of boredom, despite the risk of severe punishment if caught. To test their hypothesis, the 2 officers positioned themselves on opposing sides of the school and watched to see if anyone approached. For a prolonged period, there was no activity, including lights, sounds, or movements. However, just as the officers were about to leave, they received a call about another alarm being triggered, this time from inside the school. In an attempt to bring an end to the annoyance, they phoned the central desk and requested the building's custodian to join them for an interior sweep of the school. It was already 3 a.m. and the officers were growing weary and cranky. The custodian arrived and the 3 of them commenced a walkthrough of the school, inspecting classrooms, cupboards and maintenance rooms. The school had been built in the early 60s to accommodate all of the children on the base and featured winding corridors and numerous forking hallways that made the search process slow and tedious. It had witnessed generations of children pass through its halls on their way to bigger and better things. During the sweep, they didn't switch on any lights since they had powerful flashlights. However, it also meant that they were navigating through a deserted school in complete darkness. One of the military officers described it as an incredibly eerie experience. As they approached the end of their inspection, they observed one of the maintenance rooms with its door ajar and a light switched on inside. They were supposed to be the only 3 individuals in the building, and they had yet to enter the room. Both the police officers and the custodian confirmed that they hadn't seen the light on before or anyone entering the room. It's worth mentioning that the maintenance rooms were small, nothing more than oversized closets, with no place to hide once inside. They strode towards the room, confident that they had finally nabbed their prankster, but upon looking in, no one was there. The only items present were a few brooms and a couple of boxes of spare desk pieces. However, on the centre of the floor was a solitary wet footprint, the size of a child's foot, as if they had run through a puddle and continued across the room, tracking water with them. There was no water on the floor or anywhere nearby, and the footprint faced a wall, as if the person who left it had walked through it. Each person involved described feeling a shiver run up their spine. They affirmed that they were the only people in the building and no one had reported a missing child. They had thoroughly checked the rest of the structure in a 3-hour search and no one had entered or left. So where did the footprint come from? To this day, no one knows.